I'm Nicolas Escoffier, a lead researcher at NeuroLandscape, and we're at the IFLA World Congress in Singapore. And we're speaking with Professor Chun-Yen from Taiwan. Hello, Professor.
Hi.
So, how do you think your research, the research on the effect of landscape on the brain and on well-being in general, how do you think that could be transferred to practice?
Yes.
And how do you think that can help design actually landscape that are more effective in like promoting people well-being and generally?
What we're doing right now, we are working on what we don't have the result yet. But what we trying to do is, since we know the parameters from the natural landscape to the human brain, like the frequency of the landscape, like the fragmentation of the landscape, the color of the landscape, how they related to brain reactions. So if we know their relationship, my ideal situation is we can fit with the prototypes of the landscape, how they stimulate the activities of different area of the brains, and then we can think about the Google Map. They help you to choose the route from A to B with the fastest way. But think about if you can put the parameters of the whole route, like our cooperation lab from the UIUC, we have done a study with for every, as I remember, 5 seconds or 15 seconds, they grab a scenery from the street view and analyze the green coverage and try relate to the visitor's preference. If we have the parameters and relate it with the scenery of the Google Street View, we know how they related to the brain activities if you're walking on that route. So maybe imagine that in the Google Map, it's not only the driving the car or taking the bus or bicycling or walking, but still have a good for your prefrontal cortex, good for your hippocampus, good for your amygdala.
Yes.
Then I can choose if I want to improve my memory, something like that. If I'm getting older, kind of very good in my memory, maybe I should choose this selection and ask me to if the refraction of the water will benefit to hippocampus. Maybe I can choose the route who can close and let you see the refraction of the water of the route that can go to your office back home or go to school back home. For the students, they work very hard and they get a chance to relax in or empty their brain and get the attention back. So that's our plan right now. So we try to find someone to write the API language to add the functions of the Google Map. So that's what we're doing right now.
So in your talk earlier, you mentioned that some of the effects were related to effect on attention, and so you mentioned this like bottom-up effect of attention. So maybe could you share some of the details about what aspect of the landscape would be maybe good for health and attention in general? So you mentioned maybe in terms of design as well, because that connects back to how to design landscapes so they're good for health.
Because one of our study we published in Frontier Psychology, we have tested the street trees with a very fast speed, like 0.03 seconds. That's we call it an awareness. You don't know what you saw, but you just feel something different. Even in that kind of short period of time, your attention still being improved. We test by the backward digit span with 14 digits. So before and after, there are still significant differences. Even people are not aware there is a street tree. So what are we thinking about the bottom up? If we can get the evidence of the environment which can stimulate your brain with the bottom up, not related to the higher cognition, memory, something like that, but very basic reactions for the humankind. I think that's very, very important. So that's why I said I'm very interested about an awareness landscape. you are not aware if you take a bus or you drive, you are not aware the street trees while you passing that street. But there is a function to your brain already. So I think we guess that's a bottom-up process. So if we can identify the root of the brain areas, we can use I don't know what we need to do is like a MRI or MEG to see the times sequence.
Yeah, so that's bring me to one of the questions also that came up while you were talking. So some of the study you did, you presented photographs or landscape, and that's why it's usually done.
Yes.
So I was wondering whether you consider maybe using more like immersive experience, maybe having people actually see and experience real landscape, or maybe have like 3D VR landscapes, maybe where people could be immersed in and test them in the lab in those 3D environments. Is that something that you're considering, or you would a direction that you think would be interesting to explore?
Well, that's a little bit hard for us right now. We have kind of two ways to do this kind of research. And one way, I think the purpose is to make the experience more realistic, like similar to what you really feel while walking on the street. So maybe the smell, maybe the changes of the landscape are kind of have some spatial inference or accumulate the inferences to your brain. So what we're doing right now is we use the smell, the flower smell to stimulate the fresh flowers, not the kind of incense oil, but fresh flowers, and see what's the brain reaction at that moment. So make it feels real. But on the other side, it's more convenient is to use like a VR or the video. We're still working on that because I think both methods has benefits to understand how people react to different environmental interventions.
Interesting. And so the study you run were on healthy participants, am I right? So I'm wondering whether you consider also looking at people with specific pathologies, such as maybe like depression, because there was this slide that you presented with like all the consequences of aging, like dementia, depression. So I'm wondering whether you consider maybe looking at clinical populations and exploring the effect of. Is that something you think would be interesting, or I don't know?
Oh, of course, I'm very, very interested. But that is the hardest part. Because as I remember, maybe 20 years ago, we contact with the hospital and the patients. How we measure the reactions of the patients, but for each patient, that's a different individual. They use sometimes different medicine, treatment, different living style, different housing environment. So we kind of cooperate. Recently, we cooperation with a medical doctor. The medical doctor even go to the patient's house and collect the dust and analyze what's the content in the dust. And recording the kind of the pollution, the air pollution, the level of the pollution in his house, the microclimate in his house. So that's a lot of work to do. You need to control a lot of variables and to see what is really influential factors.
So I guess that links back to the issue of doing the same kind of study in a real environment where you also have like a lot going on. I mean, there's like illuminations that may be changing from one day to the next when you present people, and like the weather, noises, and especially in urban spaces. So these are all very complicated,
so that's why
challenging variable to control.
There is the hardest part with patients. So
you mentioned like approaching. So you mentioned your approach and did work. I mean, try to did work with like medical doctors. So did you see any interest in medical doctors, hospitals, on the effect of landscape on health, or those people not that.
Well, gradually.
That sensitive to that yet? I mean, maybe not aware yet, or?
No, I think they're aware the influence of the environment right now. But 10 years ago, they are too busy to deal with this problem. But gradually, we have doctors, medical doctors from different professions. They are all interested. They start to aware that not only giving the drugs the medicine to the patients. You need to understand what's the influential factors beside the medicine. So more and more medical doctors, they feel they don't like to give the medicine directed to heal disease according to the textbook, but they would like to understand what's the patient's living style. Maybe the problem you shouldn't, or you don't need to give the medicine. You just can be cured by improve the living quality or the living environment.
Yeah, and at the same time that speaks to maybe trying to have more personalized treatments and interventions for different people, even based on their background, their pathology, how it developed. I mean, you could even imagine having landscape that are like specifically designed for different people, almost. Suggest that. To go back to your Google ID, maybe suggest specific places to go for people with different kind of pathology and different medical history.
That's our purpose, because we don't think the same treatment or the same design can fit everyone, because everyone has different preference. So maybe they need to say what's their preference, so that the landscape designer can design a better environment for them to improve their health.
So I do have a question on specifically on the neuroscience bit, because you mentioned you are looking at brainwaves in the research. So maybe can you say something about the specific brainwaves you're interested in and why you are interested in those?
Just as
very broad terms, right?
Yeah, just as I said, I'm a landscape architect. I'm not a real profession, but we learn and try to use this the biofeedback instrument. So when we measure the brain wave, we can only analyze the alpha wave. And alpha wave, usually people will say the alpha wave represent a clear situation, but clear but relaxing situation. So I think that's the kind of the settings that related to a good landscape design. A good landscape design can provide people relaxing but clear mind to think about, to help them thinking, just doing something.
So I think that makes sense. I mean, in the sense that you would expect that almost a lot of the effects that landscape would have on well-being and people would be actually due to what they do to relaxation and release concentration, restore concentration. I mean, attention, and that would be actually marked or linked to those frontal alpha wave.
Right. So we use alpha wave as an indicator.
So a lot of the your research you mentioned is so you mentioned you talk to doctors, neuroscientists, you yourself a landscape architect. So this is obviously very cross-disciplinary research, right? So I imagine there's some it's quite exciting, but also some challenges in working with people from different teams. I know, your landscape, we did have that experience as well. So I'd be curious to hear about your insights on working with different people, bringing them together to get that kind of project to succeed, actually.
As I said, I'm a landscape architect. I'm not really proficient in the neuroscience or psychological fields, but we do get a lot of help. Especially from Department of Psychology and Department of Electrical Engineering. So that's maybe a little far about this topic, but in National Taiwan University, we have a lab which is supported by the Ministry of Science and Technology. They set up a MRI lab, both MRI and MEG lab in the university. And all these instruments are only for research purpose, and even more, they only for the social science and humanity research purpose. So you can see what a privilege it is. You don't need to wait in the hospital for 2 months to scan one subject, but we have a machine in our university, but still very busy. The machine is still very busy, but the machine helps a lot for the social science researcher to have the opportunity to do the neuroscience studies. That's one thing. And the other thing is I get a lot of help from people from different fields. So I think my graduate students will take course from the Department of Psychology to understand some basic knowledge, and we still have technicians from electrical engineering help us to operate the machine. And besides the resources from the university, right now we kind of use our profession as a landscape architect. We kind of planning, because there's a site, we have a farm. Well, actually we have two farms, but in between two farms there is a cancer hospital. And beside the cancer hospital, there is a NGO for health promotion NGO, and they support the hospital to build up the whole system. So we kind of from the agriculture and medical system, we try to combine them together. We call it a biomedical corridor. So in that aspect, the cancer hospital can get benefits from landscape designer to design the healing gardens around the hospital, and their patients can go to the farm to do the horticulture therapy, to do the farming therapy, to experience the nature, and also the farm can provide the organic healthy food to the patients in that hospital. So we are kind of cooperated with NGO, hospital, and our farms in the university to run the whole area. That's what we are doing right now.
So I mean, the field is growing. I mean, there's a lot of like opportunities for like new work and new collaborations. So do you have any visions on what things could look like for the future? I mean, on different aspects, maybe in terms of research, but also in terms of work and collaborations between practitioners and researchers, so that those findings can actually impact people's lives?
Well, actually, when I'm talking about the Google map to help you to build to select a suitable route or healthier route for your work or school, that's one kind of that's our future plan. Although it's not very really future, but that's what we're doing right now. But I think that will spend us maybe 10 years to do that, and that's I think it's about time for me to retire. So what's the next step is I try to use this period of time to kind of, on one side is to recruit more younger generation and younger starters, or kind of transform our experience to the younger generation. And I also ask my graduate students to think something, beyond what we right now. So my final slide of my presentation today is never stop looking for things that's not there. So that's one thing. So in regards to in regards to your question, I don't have a very solid research, but we have multiple trials right now. Just like we are trying some kind of wearable device compare with GPS and the environment. That's one other things that I haven't mentioned. So I think in our lab, I encourage my graduate students to try, even it's to learn from the mistake. So we have a lot of multi directions, and we will see which direction is has the better potential for the future studies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.